Well, good morning, everybody. This is Dear Mama Sal, and it is a strange morning. It's 4 degrees, but it feels much colder. Much colder. That would make it 39 in American. And I got a traffic jam. So there's never a traffic jam on this road. You know, it's my local little side road sections, and it's just like, when do we ever have a 3-car waiting for the lights to change? Ridiculous. Okay, the subject today is fear, and oh, sorry about that. And the reason for that, oh shush. The reason for that is because Chantal very kindly wrote to me about it, and Chantal comes up with some really good subjects, but not only says, will you talk about this, but also is quite happy to discuss her idiosyncrasies around it. And I say idiosyncrasies because sometimes we have to look at these things and go, well, how does she word this? And what I loved about Chantal is she told me about a fear and then immediately said, and I know this is irrational. So that then takes it away from being a terror, if you know what I mean. I guess it can still be a terror, but what it does is it means that there's part of her that knows this is not something that comes from her adult. Because if she can process the fact that this is irrational, then obviously she can dissociate away from this fear to some degree. So good on you there for being able to do that, Chantal, and let's talk about what you actually said to me. So Chantal said to me that, number one, she has a fear of losing her child. And the flip side to that, she is equally fearful of her child losing her. And then the third part of the story was, and she has a fear of frogs. So those are 3 pretty powerful issues that she discussed. So thank you for that, Chantal. Let's see if we can work our way through it. Now, I don't have the answers to everything, Chantal, as you well know, but I am prepared to discuss them from my own experience, and I think that is the best that anybody can do, because you are smart enough as an adult to be able to work through this if you choose to. Wow, that's really weird. There's a bus stop bench covered with clothes. It's like somebody's left clothes for, you know, you imagine if you go to the bus stop and you go to sit down and there are a whole bunch of clothes there. Why does that not strike me as quite right? Anyway, never mind. So let's take one bit at a time. So the first part was she has a fear of losing her child. Wow, Chantal, I don't think there's a mother or a father alive that doesn't have that fear at some point. I want to tell you, not just a mother or a father either. I think I might have told you about the day that I took my neighbor's children to the science fair here in Vancouver one year. And I mean, I only had responsibility for them for the day. And one minute I was holding a 5-year-old by the hand, and the next minute he was gone. And I can tell you the absolute terror I felt in that moment was well, I'm sure there's everybody that's had that moment knows exactly what it feels like, and you can say, oh, well, it's not the same, you know, you're not a parent. Imagine my terror of having to go home and saying, gee, I'm really sorry, but I lost your child. Yeah, it's not the sort of what you call a conversation starter, is it? So I was really, really terrified of that. So, and I really related to the ongoing, non-stop, 24/7 responsibility of being a parent. I literally did not feel him lose connection from me for whatever reason. And I mean, I must admit that 2 steps later I found him, but for that split second, I assure you, my whole world changed. So I totally relate to the fact that you can have an unbelievable fear of losing your child. So I think this is a discussion that you need to hear from not just me, but you need to hear it from other mothers. And I cannot imagine that there's a mother out there that hasn't had this fear to some degree. And perhaps we can ask mothers generally who listen to this to give some help to Chantal as to what you managed to do to process this through and be able to not have it affect you so much. Now, I get a feeling that this probably isn't affecting Chantal in a massive way, but I could be wrong. If it is, she worded it quite calmly. But anybody who's got any advice that you could give Chantal about how you coped around this would be wonderful. So, Chantal, let's look at the second side, is that you have a fear that you will not be there for your child. Again, I think a very normal reaction for a parent, which is why most people do a number of things to cover for that. In other words, they make sure that they've got a will set up and that you have it documented who it is that you wish to look after your children in the event of you not being there. I'm not sure, Chantal, whether you're a single mum or not, and forgive me for that one, because I'm not sure if you mentioned that. So let's presume that you are, and if you are, then you really do need to get a legal document signed somewhere that says, in the event of something happening to me, you know, I nominate so-and-so. By the way, make sure so-and-so agrees to it, to look after my child. The same as, I think you'll find that most of us who are pet owners, no, it's not the same, but I just want to say that it's what I call anybody who has that sense of responsibility. One of the first things I do every time I get a new pet is to set up a pet parent. In other words, if anything happens to me, will this person take over my pet for me? You know, and make sure that the pet is okay. I always do that without question. So let's just make sure that there are ways that you can set this up. I think a lot of families, for example, who have parents in the military, you know, they're very quick to set up second families. In the event of something happening to me, I would like so-and-so to act as in my stead. I think that's what they call it. So, and you might nominate different people, you know, the same as we in the Christian faith, you nominate godparents. You can nominate different people. In other words, you can have Susan, who you ask to look after the emotional needs of your child, and then George to look after the hunting, fishing and shooting type needs. So, you know, whatever it is, you get to do that and set it up. And hopefully you will find Julia, who is really creative, to look after some of those needs, you know, to make sure that it doesn't just have one parent in the event that you are not there for them, but they have a number of them. And it's doable. Now, can you totally guard against that loss? No, you can't. You know, unless you're ruler of the universe, you don't have that power. And so the third part of this is the fear of frogs. Now, the first thing that came to my mind, Chantal, when I read that was, you didn't listen to the same fairy stories as I did, because I mean, whilst frogs to me are a bit, let's put it this way, they're not the prettiest of all animals, are they? Except, you know, there are a couple that are really beautifully coloured, I guess. The blue one that I found out was one of the most dangerous things in the world. But so you look at it and you go, you know, frogs, just by virtue of their outward being, are not what you might call things that will endear you to them. I mean, put a frog next to a bunny rabbit, and who's going to win out every time? Before you even find out what's inside the frog or bunny brain, right? Now, for all we know, the bunny rabbit is a little so-and-so and beats the living daylights out of, you know, everybody in its lettuce patch. But frogs, we will make a judgment call. If you're like most people, which I presume you are, Chantal, because you are so honest about your stuff. So that brings us back to the conversation we've had a number of times over the last couple of years, which is rationalize. Which, when you break it down, are rational lies. We rationalize our fears. So the question that I ask people a lot about these sort of things has to do with, well, hang on a second. You know, if I gave you the opportunity to have the most dangerous weapon that man had ever devised in your control, would you want it? And most people say, no, of course not, I don't like weapons. And I go, it's called a motor car. You see, every day we get in a motor car and drive, and yet the statistics say that this is a very dangerous weapon. But our need to go from point A to point B in a relatively short space of time is greater than our fear of the weapon. And most of us don't even give it a second thought until something goes wrong with it. Then we give it a lot of thought. So I would ask you, Chantal, to have a look at, where did you first get scared of frogs? Now, most of us grew up listening to fairy tales that told us frogs actually were princes in disguise. Well, at least some of them were. And that if you kissed enough of them, you know, you would find your Prince Charming, which I, for one, found frogs a lot more acceptable. And I can't help wondering whether that fairy tale didn't come about for that very reason. You know, and if you kiss enough frogs, you know, you'll find your prince. Well, I assure you, I kissed a lot of frogs in my time. Didn't get very far. So I look at it and go, what lies have you been telling yourself about frogs? And have a look at the fear. What is your fear? That they will jump on you, or that they will stick to you and have it's not the frog that you're scared of. It is what the frog may do that scares you. I always remember listening, if you ever get a chance to read any of Wayne Dyer, Dr. Wayne Dyer, his stuff, just did some amazing work on this issue. And I can remember way back reading some of his books, and they were funny, because, you know, he'd really make you laugh at your fears. Because he'd say, he wrote a book, something about Uranus, and I can't remember what it was. But I know the word Uranus came into it because he has a little play on words there as well. But one of the things I remember him saying was, you know, people talked about a fear of heights. And he said, heights don't attack you. You know, when did a height last, you know, jump out at you? No, it is what goes on in our brains that makes us fearful. It's not the actual thing. So, Chantal, I don't know if this is making any sense, but it's not frogs that scare you. It's your perception of frogs that scares you. So I always love this thing about, you know, heights. And he in this book, this particular book that he wrote, it actually was a fairy tale where actually heights could scare you. You know, you could be halfway up a mountain and the top of the mountain would come off and go boo. Which was really clever, because you go, yeah, that is ridiculous. But it was very, very meaningful at the same time. Or you look at highly functioning people that have serious OCD problems. You know, I'm thinking about people with germ phobias and stuff like that. They have an unbelievable fear of germs, sufficient that they wash their hands, you know, multiple times an hour, never mind a day. What caused that? Well, in a lot of cases, that sort of behavior comes about as a type of control. It is something they can control. They can't control disease in the world, but they can control their ability to contract a disease by being very clean. Now, the rest of you are going, yeah, but you can just as easily pick up a disease by any other way, and that is true. But you understand that for a lot of people, that is their way of doing their best. So, Chantal, here's what I would ask you to do, and anybody else who relates to what Chantal was talking about, please give her some support on this one. Because here's what I would have you do. First of all, to realize you're quite normal, and that we all have fears. Now, Chantal also asked me to talk about some of mine, and I will talk to you about that tomorrow. And you will find out that mine are probably very different, but we all have our little fears that we carry around with us. So, what I would have you do, though, is to look at this whole thing about the fear and look at how you are processing it. And really investigate it. Yeah, what is it about frogs? Is it the frog that scares you, or is it what the frog might do that scares you? Now, if, for example, you have a fear that it will jump on you, then this is called, do you technically know how far a frog can jump? And if you do, you will know to keep that far away from a frog, and then it won't jump on you. As far as you can. the other thing is to desensitize yourself to frogs. A lot of people do that. And to desensitize yourself to them, and that would be to really study frogs. Go to the science museum and study them. Go to the zoo and study them. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think where you would go, but really go to the no, they're not reptiles, are they? But you know what I mean? Just go and study them, and go and Google them to bits and find out all you can about frogs, and find out that they really are quite, on the whole, quite peace-loving sort of things. And do what you can to protect yourself on the other issues. The business about losing your child or being unavailable to your child. Those two things are things that you can do certain legal things around or practical things around. I would also have you look at what is it that you fear your child will lose by you not being there, that they won't have a proper life, or they won't know how much you love them, or whatever. And write that list down and start doing things to compensate for that. For example, a lot of people have written letters to their children in the event that something happens to them, which is what the military also does, have people write letters. In the event that you don't make it out of here, what do you want your loved ones to know? Write that letter, because you never know when you're going to need it. And in the event that you should lose your child, what would you have wished that you had told them? And tell them that on a very regular basis. So at least you never have to say they didn't know. I never got a chance to tell them. Whatever it is that you want to tell them, tell them. And so the trick of this, if you like, and it's not a trick, is get control back. Because when you look at these things, ask yourself, what is the emotion I feel? Yes, it's fear, but is it helplessness? Is it, what is it that really is below it?